I've never really been the kind of person to share personal stories online. But this one, well, it's different. Something happened recently that has made me question everything I knew about my relationships and the people I trusted the most. It's still fresh, and I'm still processing it, but I think telling it here might help me make sense of what happened, even if it's just a little bit. Let me start from the beginning, where everything seemed perfectly fine. I was 32 years old, living in a small but cozy house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, working a steady 9-to-5 job in marketing. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I had my routine. Everything in my life seemed to be in its place. That was, until I met Julie. Julie was 28 when we first crossed paths. She was the kind of person who had that infectious smile that made everyone feel like they were the center of her world. She was outgoing, easy to talk to, and there was something magnetic about her. She and I clicked immediately, and over the next few months, we grew close. Really close. I couldn't even remember how it happened, but she went from being someone I'd run into at parties to being one of my best friends. But it wasn't just me she'd gotten close to. She seemed to have this ability to weave herself into the fabric of everyone's lives, from our group of friends to even my family. Her charm worked wonders, and before long my parents adored her. They thought she was smart, funny, and a great influence on me. She'd come over for family dinners and everything seemed so perfect. Julie wasn't just a friend though. Over time I realized I was starting to have feelings for her. In hindsight, I think I had them from the very beginning. But I pushed them down because, well, we were friends, and I didn't want to risk ruining that dynamic. But I couldn't ignore them forever. One evening, as we were watching a movie at my place, I finally confessed. The words came out all at once, like a dam breaking. "Julie, I think I like you more than just a friend." She didn't hesitate. She smiled, took my hand and said, "I'm glad you feel that way. I've been thinking the same thing." That was it. Just like that, we were together. It felt like the natural next step. I couldn't have asked for a better start to a relationship. I was in love, and life was as close to perfect as it could get. But that's when things began to shift. Julie and I started spending more time together. We'd go on weekend trips, enjoy dinner dates, and slowly I noticed something about her. She was always texting, always on her phone. At first, I didn't think much of it. She worked in tech, so I figured it was just work-related. But soon enough, her phone was glued to her hand, and she would text late into the night. Her behavior started to change too. She seemed more distant, less present when we were together. At first, I chalked it up to her being busy, maybe stressed, but I began to wonder if there was something else going on. One evening, I decided to confront her. It wasn't easy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Julie, you've been a little distant lately. Is everything okay?" I asked. Her response caught me off guard. She sighed and put her phone down, looking at me with a mix of frustration and something I couldn't place. "It's nothing, just work stuff," she said, but there was an edge to her voice that I hadn't heard before. "You know how it is," I pressed further. "You've been acting weird. You're always on your phone. You've been canceling plans. I don't know. Something's off," I said. My voice was shaking. I hated that I was even asking, but I had to know. Julie looked at me, her eyes flickering for a moment, like she was deciding whether to tell me the truth or not. "I'm fine, really," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired, that's all. Work's been a lot lately. I promise. Everything's good." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and we had plans to meet up for dinner, but she called me and said she couldn't make it. "I'm sorry, something came up. I'll make it up to you, I promise," she said over the phone. But something in her tone made me uneasy. Still, I didn't want to be overbearing, so I told her it was fine and we could reschedule. But that evening, I had a gut feeling that wouldn't leave me alone, so I decided to drive to her apartment. I don't know why. Maybe it was just a hunch, or maybe I was being irrational, but I couldn't shake it. I drove the familiar route to her place, and when I arrived, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. There, parked in front of her apartment, was a car I recognized. It belonged to Matt, her ex-boyfriend, the one I'd heard her talk about in the past, the one she said she'd never get back together with. I froze, staring at the car for what felt like an eternity. My mind raced, but I couldn't make sense of it. I wasn't sure what to do, but after a long pause, I walked to her door and knocked. Julie opened it with a surprised expression. "Hey, what are you doing here?" she asked. I wanted to check on you," I said. "You said you were busy, but I saw Matt's car outside." I couldn't keep the tremor out of my voice. Julie's face changed in an instant. The smile faded, and she stepped outside, closing the door behind her. She lowered her voice. "Look, I didn't want to tell you this, but Matt's just helping me with some stuff. It's not what you think," she said quickly. But I knew that wasn't the whole story. I stood there for a moment staring at Julie, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "Helping you with stuff?" I repeated, my voice sounding flat even to me. It felt like the words were coming out of my mouth without me really thinking about them. But I had to know the truth. Julie shifted uncomfortably on her feet, her eyes darting away for a split second. "It's nothing," she said, her voice a little too quick, a little too high-pitched. He's been helping me with some work stuff, the kind of tech stuff you wouldn't understand." She let out a nervous laugh, and I could tell she was trying to play it off, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at her, trying to read her face, trying to catch some kind of hint of honesty, but all I saw was unease. She was nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. This wasn't just helping with stuff, I could feel it. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't stupid, that I knew something was off, that I wasn't buying her story. But instead, I just asked the one question that had been on my mind since I saw Matt's car. "Is there something you're not telling me, Julie?" Her expression changed. For a moment, her eyes softened, like she was debating whether or not to come clean. But then, just as quickly, she snapped back into her usual calm composure. "You're overthinking this," she said, her voice quiet now, almost pleading. "I don't want you to worry about it, it's just complicated." That word, complicated, was something I had heard before, and I hated it. It was always a red flag. It meant there was something more to the story, something hidden beneath the surface, and she didn't want to let me in on it. I let out a slow breath. "If it's really nothing, then why hide it from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the frustration bubbling up inside of me. "Why the secrecy?" Julie's face hardened slightly, like my question hit a nerve. "I didn't hide anything," she snapped, taking a step back. "You're just, being a little paranoid, that's all." Her eyes shifted to the ground, and for a second I thought she was about to break down and confess everything. But instead, she just stepped back from the door. "I'm tired, okay? I need some space," she said, almost too calmly. I stood there for a second, my mind racing. I didn't want to push too hard, but something inside me was telling me that I wasn't getting the full story. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But we need to talk about this. I don't know what's going on, but I can feel it." Julie didn't answer, just closed the door gently behind her. I stood there for a while longer, staring at the door, my mind spinning. It felt like a scene out of a movie, like I was watching myself from the outside, unable to comprehend what was happening. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but there was something about the way she acted that made me feel like I was the one being played. I walked back to my car, each step feeling heavier than the last. What was going on? Was I just overthinking things? I'd never been the type to jump to conclusions, but this felt different. It felt like something was slipping through my fingers, like I was losing grip on the person I thought I knew. That night, I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julie's face, that forced smile, the way she was hiding something. And every time I tried to push the thoughts away, I kept coming back to Matt. Why was he still in her life? Why was she lying about it? I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't just let it go. The doubt was eating at me, and I needed answers no matter how much it hurt. The next day I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I called Matt. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to him or what I expected to hear. I just needed to know if Julie's story was real or if I was being lied to, but the moment the phone rang, I felt a lump form in my throat. "Hello?" Matt's voice was casual, maybe a little too casual. "Matt," I said, trying to sound calm, though my voice betrayed me. "It's me, Jack." There was a slight pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. "Oh, hey man," he said a little too quickly. "What's up?" I hesitated. I wasn't sure how to ask this without sounding completely insane, but I had to know. "I need to ask you something about Julie," I said, my heart racing. There was a long silence, and I could feel the tension building. "What about Julie?" Matt asked, his tone shifting, now guarded. "Look, I know you two have been in touch recently," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I'm just trying to understand what's going on because it's not adding up. I saw your car outside her place last night. Why were you there?" Matt didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing, like he was trying to decide whether or not to tell me the truth. Finally, he let out a sigh. "Look, Jack, it's complicated, all right? Julie and we've been talking. But it's not like you think. She's been going through some stuff, and I've just been trying to help her out." I clenched my fists, fighting to stay calm. "Help her out? Help her with what exactly?" "Look, man, I'm not going to get into it, but just know that Julie's been having a tough time. She doesn't want you to know about it. She's trying to protect you from it. That's all I can say." I could feel my face flush with anger and confusion. "So you're telling me that she's been keeping secrets from me, and you're the one she's turning to for help?" There was another long pause before Matt spoke again. "Yeah, something like that," he said softly. "But it's not what you think. She's not cheating on you or anything. Just trust me on this one." "Trust you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How am I supposed to trust any of you right now?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every word that came out of Matt's mouth felt like another nail in the coffin, another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. But the worst part wasn't what he was saying, it was what he wasn't saying. "Trust me," he'd said. But how could I? How could I trust anyone after all this? I felt a surge of frustration course through me, and before I even realized it, I was pacing back and forth in my living room, phone still pressed to my ear. "You're telling me Julie's going through some stuff," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "But you're not going to tell me what? How am I supposed to just sit here and wait for her to figure it out, while she's keeping secrets from me and calling you for help?" Matt's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Jack, man, just trust me on this, okay? Julie's a good person. She's not trying to hurt you. She's just dealing with things her own way. Let her work through it. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but she's not going behind your back or anything." The words felt hollow, like they were meant to soothe me, but instead, they only made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. "So what? You're the one she's been going to for comfort, and you expect me to believe there's nothing going on? How does that even make sense?" I could almost hear Matt's shoulders slump over the phone. "I know this sounds crazy, but it's the truth. I don't want to get in the middle of your relationship, Jack, but you have to give her space. She's got a lot going on." I wanted to yell at him, demand more answers. But what would that get me? What could he possibly say that would make any of this better? My mind was racing, spinning in circles. Every time I thought I had a grip on the situation, the ground slipped out from beneath me again. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. There was nothing left to say, not really. I was alone with my thoughts and they weren't pretty. For the next few days, I tried to keep myself busy. Work, errands, anything to distract myself from the gnawing feeling of betrayal that wouldn't leave me alone. But the more I tried to push it down, the worse it got. Every time I saw Julie's name pop up on my phone, I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to talk to her, to ask her what the hell was going on, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Part of me was still holding on to that hope that maybe Matt was right, that maybe I was just overreacting, but deep down I knew better. The doubts had already taken root, and there was no way to shake them. Julie finally called me that Friday night. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Hey Jack," she said, almost like she wasn't sure if she should be calling at all. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know, Julie, can we? Because I'm not sure I can keep pretending that everything's fine when I know something's not right." There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could feel her weighing my words. "I know you're upset," she said quietly, "and I don't blame you, but you have to understand, this isn't easy for me." "Yeah, well, it's not easy for me either," I snapped, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I need to understand, Julie. What's going on?" Why have you been pushing me away? Why won't you tell me the truth?" She let out a long sigh, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then, after a deep breath, she spoke again. "It's complicated," she said, just like before, that dreaded word that had haunted me for days. "I didn't want you to get involved in this. I didn't want to drag you into my mess, but I know I can't keep avoiding it." "Julie, I need more than that," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't keep doing this. If you can't be honest with me, then I don't know where we're going." There was another pause, and then I heard her voice, small but determined. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time in days, I could hear the sincerity in her words. "I've been seeing Matt. We've been talking, trying to work through some things, but it's not what you think. I didn't want to hurt you, Jack. I never meant to hurt you." My stomach dropped as the reality of her words hit me. It felt like I had been punched in the gut, and I struggled to find the right words to respond. "You've been seeing Matt," I repeated slowly, "while we've been together? Why didn't you tell me this?" "I was scared," she said quietly. "Scared of what you'd think, scared of losing you. But I know now that I should have been honest from the start. I messed up and I'm so sorry." My head was spinning. Everything felt like it was unraveling, like I was losing control of everything that mattered. I had trusted her, trusted both of them, and now I felt like a fool. "You should have told me the truth," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But instead, you lied to me over and over again." She started to say something, but I cut her off. "I don't think I can do this anymore, Julie. I don't think I can trust you after everything that's happened. You've been hiding things from me for weeks, and now I'm just supposed to believe that you never meant to hurt me." "I never wanted to hurt you, Jack," she pleaded. "I was just confused. I didn't know what to do, but I love you. I do. I want to fix this." My heart broke hearing her say that, but I knew that love wasn't enough. Not anymore. Not when trust had been shattered beyond repair. "I don't know if you can fix this," I said quietly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I don't think I can keep doing this." I could feel the weight of Julie's words still hanging in the air, pressing down on me, but they didn't carry the same weight they once had. It felt like everything that had built up between us, the late-night talks, the trips, the plans for the future, had come crashing down, and now I was just left with the wreckage of what used to be. I could tell she was desperate, but my mind was made up, even if it hurt like hell. "I don't know how we can fix this," I said, my voice steady but distant. "You've lied to me, Julie. You've lied about something that was so important to me, and I can't just ignore that." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to make this right, Jack. I don't want to lose you. I love you, but I know I messed up." Her words hung in the air like an echo, but I couldn't let myself believe them anymore. Not after everything that had happened. It was hard enough just to get the words out, but I knew I had to say them. "Maybe you love me, but love isn't just about words. It's about trust, and right now, I don't trust you." There was another pause, a long one, and I could feel the tension building between us. "Jack, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I never meant for this to happen. I never meant for you to get hurt." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to push down the anger, the frustration, and the hurt that was threatening to boil over. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," I said, "but you did. And now I have to figure out if I can even trust you again." Julie's voice cracked. "You can't just throw everything away. Please, Jack. We've been through too much for this to end like this." But it wasn't that simple. "It's not just about throwing it all away, Julie," I said. "It's about me having to question everything. Every word you said, every action you took, and that's not something I can just forget. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when I know it's not." The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. I could hear her breathing like she was trying to find the right words, but there were no right words left. Everything she said felt like an excuse, an attempt to patch things up, but none of it mattered anymore. The damage was done. I think we need some space," I said, the words feeling like they were being torn from me. "I need some time to think. And you need time to figure out what you really want." Julie didn't respond right away. I could feel her holding back the tears, trying to stay strong, trying to keep it together. But I knew it was over. No matter how much she tried to hold on, no matter how much I tried to convince myself we could fix it, the truth was that we were both too broken to make it work. Finally, she spoke, her voice small and fragile. I'll give you the space you need. But please, don't give up on us, Jack. Not like this. I'm not giving up on you, Julie, I said softly, even though I wasn't sure if I believed it. I'm just giving up on this version of us. We can't go back to what we were. We can't unsee what's happened. There was another long pause, and then I heard the sound of her taking a deep breath. Okay, she said quietly. I understand, I wish I could make it right. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the emotion in check. I know you do, but some things can't be fixed. Not this. The line went dead after that, and I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, staring at the empty space in front of me. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel like I had the closure I was hoping for. All I felt was the numbness of knowing I had to let go of something I had once thought would last forever. It wasn't easy. It wasn't even close to easy. I thought back on everything we'd been through together, those quiet moments, the laughter, the plans for the future. And I couldn't help but wonder where it had all gone wrong. But I couldn't keep asking myself that. I couldn't keep searching for answers that didn't exist anymore. That weekend, I packed up my things and drove to my parents' house. I needed a break, some time away from the mess I'd found myself in. My parents weren't exactly thrilled to see me showing up unannounced, but they understood. They could see the hurt in my eyes, the same way I had when I walked in on them all those years ago. They didn't ask questions. They just let me be. For the first time in a long time, I let myself sit in silence. No phone calls, no texts, no distractions. Just me and the space I needed to clear my head. I stayed with them for a few days, avoiding contact with Julie and avoiding contact with anyone who might remind me of the mess I was trying to escape. But it wasn't the silence that healed me. It was the distance, the space to think, to breathe, to remember who I was before I let myself get tangled in someone else's drama. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let her mistakes dictate how I saw myself. The truth was, I was better off without the lies, better off without the doubt. It was time for me to rebuild, to focus on what mattered, and to stop holding on to something that was broken beyond repair. When I finally returned home, I was different. I didn't feel angry anymore, or sad, or confused. I just felt done. Done with the past. Done with Julie. Done with everything that had happened. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe again. When I walked back into my apartment, it felt different. It felt like a place I could finally call my own again. A place where I didn't have to carry the weight of everything that had happened. The silence was almost comforting now, like a blanket I could wrap myself in. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Alone, yes, but not lonely. It was a strange balance I was starting to find, the kind that comes with letting go of something that wasn't meant to be. The first few days back were tough, but in a way, they were liberating. I didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to check my phone every 5 minutes to see if Julie was trying to reach out. I didn't have to sit there and wonder what she was doing, whether Matt was still in the picture, or if she was really feeling guilty for the way things had gone down. It wasn't my problem anymore, and that realization was like a weight lifting off my chest. I went back to my old routine. I threw myself into work, into the things that made me happy. I spent time with my friends, reconnected with old hobbies, and even took up a few new ones. It wasn't about filling the void that Julie had left behind. It was about rediscovering parts of myself that I'd put on hold, things I'd ignored because I was too wrapped up in trying to make something work that wasn't meant to. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. There were still moments when I thought about her, those late-night phone calls, the laughs we shared, the feeling of her hand in mine, but those moments didn't sting anymore. They were just memories now, reminders of who I had been and who I was becoming. I wasn't the same person who had let his life revolve around someone else's choices. I was stronger, more aware of my worth. I also made a decision that I hadn't thought I would make for a long time. I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. I wasn't looking for a relationship to replace what I had with Julie, but I wasn't going to let the past hold me back. I went out with a few people here and there just to get back into the swing of things, and what I realized was that I could still find joy in the simple things: good conversation, shared laughter, the kind of connection that wasn't clouded by secrets or lies. One night, after a few weeks of getting back into the groove of things, I bumped into Matt at a local bar. It wasn't planned, and honestly, I didn't expect to see him at all. He looked the same, a little older, a little wearier, but the same guy who had lied to me, who had been part of the whole mess with Julie. For a moment, I hesitated, not sure what to say or even if I wanted to say anything, but then he spotted me and came over. "Jack," he said, his voice cautious, like he wasn't sure how I would react. I didn't expect to see you here." I took a sip of my drink, eyeing him for a second before replying. "Yeah, well, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs." There was an awkward silence, one that neither of us knew how to fill. Matt shifted uncomfortably, then looked me in the eye. "Look, man, I want to say I'm sorry," he said, his words slow but genuine, "for everything that happened, for how I handled things. I know I messed up. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help but feel a little bit of sympathy." "Yeah, you did," I said, not in an angry way, but in a way that was simply accepting the reality of it all. "You both did." Matt nodded, his face looking regretful. "I never meant to hurt you, Jack. I hope you know that." I didn't respond right away. The old me might have lashed out, might have felt the urge to let him know exactly how much he'd hurt me, how much they both had. But the new me? The one who had found peace and strength in moving forward? He just nodded. "It's all good," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've moved on. We all have to live with our choices." Matt seemed to take that in for a moment, then gave me a short, tight smile. "Yeah, I guess we do." He didn't say anything else after that, just turned and walked away, and I stood there watching him go, not with anger, but with a kind of finality. That chapter was closed. I didn't have to chase after it anymore. It was over. As the weeks passed, I started to find more balance. I started to understand that moving on wasn't just about leaving someone behind. It was about reclaiming your own life, your own happiness. I learned to trust myself again, to rely on my own strength, and to value the relationships that really mattered, the ones built on honesty, respect, and mutual trust. And in time, I met someone new. Her name was Emily, and she was different from Julie, different in ways that felt right. She wasn't perfect, and I wasn't looking for perfection. But there was something about her that felt like the start of something real, something simple and honest. We took things slow, built our connection one conversation at a time, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that there was more to life than betrayal and heartache. Julie and I never spoke again after that night on the phone. She sent a few messages and tried reaching out a few times, but I never replied. I didn't need to. I had already forgiven her in my own way. But I didn't owe her any more of my time, my energy, or my heart. Those things belonged to me now. I didn't get the answers I wanted from Julie, and maybe I never would. But what I did get was clarity. I learned that closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes it comes from within. You have to let go of the past and choose to move forward, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. Because in the end, the only person who can truly fix you is you. And I was fixing myself, one day at a time. Story 2. I trusted my best buddy to assist me deal with my wife's strange conduct, but I later realized that he wasn't the person I should trust. Hello everyone. All I wanted to do was tell you the truth. Recently, the channel has been a little slower, and to be honest, I worked really hard to uncover these tales so that I could continue to provide you with the greatest material. It would mean the world to me if you found enjoyment in what I do. Assuming you click the subscribe button, your assistance is crucial to the success of our adventure and makes all the difference. I really appreciate you being here with me. Let's begin the video now. Looking back, I suppose you could say that love blinded me, but at the moment, everything felt ideal. The OP begins. I met Mary around 25 years ago. From the first time I saw her, I thought I'd finally found the one. Everyone in the room seemed to feel like the most important person in her universe because of the way she carried herself. I was not exempt from it. She was smart, humorous, and stunningly beautiful. It was unbelievable to me that someone like her would ever consider me. Our easy connection was what, in my opinion, truly made the difference. We connected because we had similar humor, ideals, and even pastimes. Fishing and scuba diving are two outdoor pursuits that I have always loved. Mary was eager to give them a try even though she had no prior experience with either. To me, that in and of itself meant everything. For me, it was more than simply her doing new things. When I talked about the topics I was passionate about, she would light up. For the first year of our relationship, it gave me the impression that we were actually creating something. We seemed to be in a bubble of our own. We went to restaurants, explored new locations, or just stayed home and binge-watched movies together virtually every free minute. Everything seemed natural. I was informed by my friends how fortunate I was to have met her. They were correct. That's what I believed at the time anyhow. It was only natural for us to start spending more time at her house after a year or so of dating. Although I still had my own apartment, it was more of a location to store my belongings than a place where I lived. To be honest, I didn't mind staying in her place for the majority of my nights. Being in the same room as her, waking up next to her and preparing breakfast together felt fantastic. With her, I felt like I was getting closer to the life I had always imagined. I even considered popping the question. However, as the months passed, little changes began to occur. It seemed subtle at first. During talks, Mary appeared preoccupied, as if her thoughts were elsewhere. She no longer laughed as much at my jokes as she once did. We also had a different physical relationship. Every relationship has its ups and downs, I tried to remind myself. Perhaps she was under stress or was coping with something she wasn't ready to discuss. I wanted to assume the best of her. Before long, the alterations became more apparent. She would start arguments about the smallest things, such as my supper preferences or the way I folded the clothes. She began by stating that she needed more time to herself, something she had never said previously, in the bedroom as well. To put it mildly, the passion that had seemed so natural was now all but gone. She dismissed my attempt to bring it up, claiming that I was just dreaming. "You're just thinking too much," she would say, "or it's just your imagination." I dropped it because I didn't want to exert too much pressure and run the danger of making things worse. Now that I think about it, those were the first warning signs. I couldn't though at the moment. Alternatively, I could not have wanted to see them for what they were. I didn't want to think that there was a severe problem since I liked her. I persuaded myself that she was only experiencing a phase and that things would ultimately return to normal. We had been so happy before, after all. When things were truly awful, why wouldn't we return there? I asked Billy, my best buddy, for guidance. For years, Billy and I had been close. He was the type of buddy who could always find a way to cheer you up. Almost every night we would speak on the phone, and I would complain about Mary's situation. I explained to him how aloof she had been, and how I was beginning to question whether there was another person. Billy constantly persuaded me that Mary would be insane to leave me, and that I was a wonderful person. "Simply give her some room," he would say. Or perhaps she is under stress and is unsure of how to express it. I had great faith in him, and his recommendations always seemed sensible. In retrospect, the most agonizing aspect of the entire issue was those talks with Billy. But I had no cause to question him at the moment. Having someone to talk to who seemed to actually care about what I was going through was a blessing. I even told him about my efforts to discover the truth about Mary's situation. I told him about the evenings I sat up late wondering if she was seeing someone else, or the times I'd tried to catch her in a lie. I probably should have relied less on Billy, but he was always there to listen. Billy tried to help Mary, but it didn't work out. In fact, they grew worse. The arguments increased in frequency. She grew more aloof, and I felt like I had to tread carefully simply to maintain harmony. No matter what I tried, I was unable to change the fact that I felt like a stranger in my own relationship. Although she was still there, it seemed like the lady I had fallen in love with was moving more and farther away from me. I finally got to the breaking point. I couldn't continue to live in this state of uncertainty, questioning everything and wondering if she was telling the truth. I made the decision to let go. A work opportunity in a different city, roughly 2 hours away, arose about the same time. It seemed like the ideal pretext for making a new beginning. So I accepted it. One of the most difficult choices I've ever had to make was leaving Mary behind. But that was better, I reassured myself. It was no little thing for me to leave Mary behind. I struggled with the notion for months, trying to persuade myself that we could still be a couple. But I knew in my heart that they couldn't. I couldn't continue to feel like an afterthought in a relationship. The moment was right for the chance to relocate 2 hours away. It paid more and was a better job. I must admit that I needed a change. Telling Mary that I anticipated her to be upset, maybe even angry, was the most difficult aspect. But I was taken aback by her. She hardly responded. I didn't hear her weep or plead with me to remain. Rather, she simply nodded and added, "I won't stop you if that's what you need to do." Her emotionlessness struck me more strongly than I had anticipated. Our relationship was officially gone, and it seemed like proof of that. Moving to a new city and packing up my life was a bittersweet experience. I was thrilled about the position and the opportunity to start again, on the one hand. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel as though I was fleeing from an unfixable problem. It was moving ahead, I assured myself, not fleeing. I had to believe it in order to continue. It was a hectic first few weeks in the new city. I immersed myself into my job in an attempt to block out the emptiness I was experiencing. I started to feel like I could breathe again, met some new acquaintances, and discovered some fantastic local hangouts. But when it was peaceful at night, I would find myself wondering about Mary. She could have missed me. Did she regret the outcome? Was she considering making contact? I secretly hoped she would. I still loved her in spite of everything. It wasn't the type of love that fades quickly, regardless of how much someone has damaged you. After several months, things gradually began to seem normal once more. I stopped looking at my phone in the hopes that she would leave me a message. I ceased to wonder if she might knock on my door one day and want another opportunity. That phase of my life was ended, I reminded myself, and I had to turn my attention to the future. Then my phone chimed one day at random. Mary was the one. I wasn't sure what to say at first. Her message was straightforward. "Hey, you were on my mind. How are you?" My heart seemed to skip a beat. After what seemed like an eternity of staring at the computer, I eventually typed reply. I quote, "am doing all okay. What about you?" Hours of messaging back and forth resulted from just one message. Over the course of the following several weeks, we resumed our phone conversations as before. She expressed sadness for the way things ended, and that she had been thinking about me a lot. She stated she wanted to visit me because she missed me. I ought to have exercised greater caution, but I didn't quote laughing at her jokes and hearing her voice. It was like returning home. When I was speaking with her, it was simple to forget about the distance and the agony. Perhaps we had both matured, I assured myself, and this might be a new beginning. It seemed as if no time had gone when Mary paid a visit. We spoke about everything that had happened since we'd been separated, explored the city, and reminisced about the fantastic moments during the weekend. She admitted to me that she had been improving herself and that she had made errors. She expressed her desire to put things right. I wished to trust her. Perhaps I believed her too quickly. She had been much missed, and I felt that all the pain had been worthwhile when I heard her express a desire to make things right. We made the decision to try our relationship again after the conclusion of her visit. A couple weeks later, Mary moved in with me. We began looking for a better location to live together when she got a job in the city. It had the feel of a dream. This time, I promised myself it would be different. We would make it work this time. However, there were little instances that caused me to halt even while we were making plans for the future. For example, when I saw her averting her gaze, when I mentioned the past, or when she would bring up another topic. Every time I inquired about her activities during our time apart. It didn't matter, I told myself. The fact that we were together was important. Right now, we were getting ready to move into our new flat. In order to make packing easier, I started sifting through old items. I wanted to let go of anything that didn't seem important since I was thrilled about this new chapter in our life. Mary promised to assist, but she had a lot of family to see that weekend. It didn't bother me. I was able to organize my belongings without any interruptions. I rummaged through notebooks, dug through old boxes, and threw out anything I no longer needed for hours. I discovered it at that point, Mary's diary. I didn't give it much thought at first. I assumed it was simply another of her sporadic anecdotes since it was hidden within a stack of old notebooks. However, I stopped and opened it for some reason. I wasn't trying to find anything in particular. I was simply wondering. Everything changed when I discovered it. At first, discovering Mary's notebook felt innocent. I thought it was simply one of those odd items that gets tossed around when you live with someone. It was mixed up with a stack of my old notebooks and papers. Initially, I flipped through it without hesitation. I hoped to discover some old grocery lists, sketches, or notes she had made about her job. The more I flipped, though, the more I understood that what I was seeing wasn't just a bunch of notes or innocuous thoughts. It was intimate. Quite intimate. Something prevented me from closing it even though I knew I shouldn't be reading it. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was an instinct I couldn't shake. In any case, I continued reading. The initial entries appeared to be innocuous enough. After writing about her day and her sporadic moods and thoughts regarding friends or work, the tone changed for a few pages. The entries started to focus more on myself, and not in a positive manner. She talked about missing the thrill of being single, feeling bored in our relationship, and feeling that I didn't push her enough. Even though those remarks hurt, I persisted. Then I discovered it. The Billy-related entries. There were more than one or two mentions. It contained explicit information of their romance on page after page. She explained how it began, where they would meet, and their activities. She didn't mince words. I felt sick to my stomach when she wrote about their physical bond. One statement in particular resonated with me, although I won't repeat the majority of it. Notwithstanding the passage of time, in contrast to the cozy and routine life she led with me, she characterized their connection as wild and exciting. I was having trouble breathing. As I turned the pages and read about them making fun of me behind my back, my hands were shaking. She said that because I had unintentionally informed Billy everything I suspected of infidelity, he was aware of all I was doing to attempt to catch her. I was smacked by that understanding like a truck. The person I had the most faith in. I was being stabbed in the back by the same person I had confided in at one of the most trying periods of my life. The anguish I was experiencing at the time is beyond words. It was more than despair or rage. It was total destruction. In a moment, my whole life fell apart. I recall being physically ill. Images of the two of them together laughing at me and betraying me raced through my head as I hurried to the restroom. Hoping, I returned to the journal. I was hoping that I had misinterpreted something and that there could have been a way to make everything make sense. However, it became worse the more I read. She kept a record of everything. The occasions when they had met. She told me falsehoods. They had even made little jokes about my lack of knowledge. Out of all the entries, one was particularly noteworthy. I hadn't been invited to the cookout she wrote about at Billy's place, but I still showed there. At the time, I had found it strange that he had neglected to invite me, but everyone pretended everything was okay when I arrived. I lingered for a little while before leaving since something didn't feel right. Mary described in the notebook how anxious they were when I arrived and how they had chuckled at how unaware I appeared. I felt like the greatest idiot in the world after reading those words. I confided in them, trusted them, and they had been making fun of me the entire time. I stared at the notebook in shock for what seemed like hours after I finished reading. I refrained from crying. I believe I was too numb to experience anything but shock. But the wrath came once the numbness subsided. I wasn't only upset at Billy or Mary. I was upset with myself for failing to recognize the warning signs sooner. Now everything that had appeared strange at the time made perfect sense. It like a puzzle coming together. However, I felt broken rather than content. The arguments Mary started without warning, the distance she maintained, and Billy's gradual withdrawal from our companionship. I had been too naive to realize that everything was related. I was unsure of what I needed to do, but I knew I had to do it. There was a part of me that wanted to go straight to Mary. She wasn't at home, though. Unaware that I had discovered her journal, she remained at her parents' house. I considered giving her a call, but what would I say? "Hello, after reading your diary, I've discovered that you've been having an affair with my closest buddy." Over the phone, everything seemed too vast and daunting to manage. I began creating a plan instead. I knew there was no turning back after reading Mary's journal. The treachery wasn't the only thing, it was the outright foolishness of it all. She wasn't just unfaithful to me. In the process, she made fun of me. Billy, the person I trusted the most, wasn't only skulking with my girlfriend, he was aggressively trying to hide their traces by doing what I instructed him. Trying to think of anything to do, I paced my flat that night. A part of me wanted to yell at Mary over the phone. However, what use would that serve? She was at her parents' house 2 hours away, and I had already seen that it was useless to try to reason with her. She would misrepresent what I said, turn it against me, and somehow paint herself as the victim. In the morning, I had a strategy. I wasn't going to face her head on. I was going to ensure that everyone was aware of the precise actions taken by her and Billy. I started by copying the journal. She shouldn't have been given the opportunity to lie or make any denials. I put one set in my own folder. Another set was placed in Billy's wife's envelope. She deserved to know the truth as much as I did, even though I hadn't given her much thought before. For Mary's parents, I also made a set. I then got to work packing her belongings. Everything she owned, including books, toiletries, and clothes, was placed in boxes and bags. I was not concerned with neatness. As soon as possible, I wanted her out of my apartment. When I finished, I had a stack of her belongings by the door. I also left a note on top of it. You have 24 hours to gather your belongings and depart, or I'll make a police call. I don't owe you an explanation. My name is on the lease. Stay away from me. Everything I need to know has already been stated in your journal. I added one last line at the very end. For a period, I will never be a backup plan for anyone. I then switched off my phone. When she returned, I knew she would start blowing it up. I also didn't want to put up with her justifications. The call began almost immediately after she got back to the apartment and saw the note. Messages flooded my voicemail. I cherish you. All of that was over. My life's love is you. I wasn't listening, though. Her abrupt understanding of her error and her crocodile tears didn't matter to me. She had no qualms about cheating on me. She felt bad about being discovered. Billy's messages were the ones that truly stayed with me. He had distanced himself from me as his relationship with Mary deteriorated, becoming radio silence for months. He had a lot to say now, though. He attempted to defend their behavior by saying it was an isolated incident with no significance. He even had the audacity to inquire as to if we might resolve this and talk things out. Get over it? He had been posing as my closest buddy and having an affair with my girlfriend. After then, there was no turning back. The fallout spread over the course of the following several days. I mailed Billy's wife copies of the journal. Then the bomb detonated. She thanked me for being honest with her over the phone while crying. She apparently had her own concerns about Billy for some time, but she had no evidence to support them. She did now. Not much better were Mary's parents. They called and begged me not to damage her reputation. They claimed that everyone deserves a second opportunity and that she made a mistake. However, I didn't care about their justifications. She wasn't a youth with no common sense. She was an adult who made her own decisions. Nor were the other members of our former social circle particularly helpful. I wasn't believing it when some of them said they hadn't known. In retrospect, there were several occasions when I thought something was off at Billy's house, and everyone behaved strangely when I arrived. The manner that once I relocated, people gradually stopped asking me to join in on group activities. They were aware. Not all of them, perhaps, but plenty. I had no intention of remaining to determine who was loyal and who wasn't. They were all contributing to the issue, in my opinion. Letting go of the anger was the most difficult aspect. I would mentally go over everything again whenever I felt like I was moving on. The falsehoods, the diary, the evenings I confided in Billy. The song kept playing over and over again like a broken record. I eventually lost it one night. I lost it when I was sitting by myself in my apartment, looking at the stack of Mary's belongings that she still hadn't picked up. I sobbed more intensely than I had ever cried in my life, yelled, and punched the wall. I was grieving more than simply a broken romance. I was grieving for the person I believed Mary to be, the life that I believed we were creating together. That moment was a turning point, despite how terrible it was. I came to the realization that neither she nor Billy could control me anymore. They had had enough already. I changed the locks after packing up Mary's remaining belongings and leaving them outside the flat dot. Her number was blocked by me. For the first time in years, I started concentrating on myself and erased all of the pictures of us together. Although difficult, it was essential. I refused to let their treachery define who I was. In addition to being freeing, the weeks after Mary's expulsion were extremely difficult. On the one hand, it felt good to be able to breathe again. It's time to stop being cautious. No more acting as though nothing was wrong. No more falsehoods. However, I was left with a huge void in the place of my friendship with Billy and my connection with Mary. I erased all traces of Mary from my life, including her texts and her number. However, I was unable to erase the recollections. At the worst moments, they would strike me as I was attempting to fall asleep in bed, brushing my teeth, or heading to work. Little memories of us together would slink into my head, and I would begin to doubt everything. Was any of it authentic? I first thought I couldn't rely on anyone. Who else could betray me in this way if Mary and Billy, the two people I had loved and trusted the most, could? I began to distance myself from people, even new acquaintances and co-workers. I was careful not to approach anyone too closely. However, as the days stretched into weeks, I came to a realization. I had freedom. For months, perhaps years, it was the first time. I wasn't confined to a poisonous partnership. Billy wasn't hiding anything, and I didn't have to worry about Mary telling the truth all the time. I was able to concentrate on myself, and I did just that. To prove myself, I pushed myself into my work, taking on extra tasks and staying up late. After my employer took note, I was promoted a few months later. But it wasn't just about the cash. After all that had happened, I needed to feel worthy of anything outside of work and like I was talented at something. That was the goal. I began taking up pastimes that I had put off while I was dating Mary. I had always loved scuba diving, but Mary never felt like it, so I hadn't gone in years. I no longer needed approval from anybody. I spent my weekends exploring underwater reefs and caverns after joining a local dive club. It was calm, serene, and just what I needed to get my mind straight. I also began forming new friendships. The diving club was full of like-minded individuals who didn't have any of the baggage from my previous friend circle, but at first it was difficult to let anyone in. I gradually began to re-establish my social network with individuals who truly cared about me. Regarding Billy and Mary, I avoided them as much as I could. After reading the journal, I gathered rumors that Billy's wife had expelled him. This was the last straw in their apparently troubled marriage, which had been going on for years. It felt like poetic retribution for a man who believed he could have it all when he returned to live with his parents. Mary, however, did not accept her banishment with the same grace. I received a letter from her. A real handwritten letter pleading for pardon, indeed. She said that she had changed and that she desired an opportunity to put things right. She said she had never loved someone as much as she loved me, and that she had been lost when she cheated on me. I didn't answer. It had nothing to do with resentment or seeking retribution. I simply stopped caring. I had devoted too much time and effort to unworthy individuals. Even reprimanding her or responding to her letter would have given her more attention than she merited. Life went on as years went by. Eventually, I left the final traces of that phase of my life behind when I relocated outside of the city to accept an even better job. As time passed, I heard less and less about Mary and Billy, just as I had hoped. Then, one day, an unforeseen event occurred. Someone I met. She was a woman I had never met before, and her name was Anna. Mutual friends connected us, and I immediately felt a connection that I hadn't had in years. She was down to earth, witty, and kind. Mary was all she had feigned but never been. I was wary at first. I didn't want to make a snap decision or let my prior experiences to influence it. Anna, however, was understanding with me. She was aware of my baggage, but she never made me feel guilty about it. I eventually came to the conclusion that she was authentic. After we began dating, I quickly realized she was the one. This time there were no hesitations, red flags, or misgivings. I wasn't attempting to mend something that wasn't working or afraid of losing Anna when I proposed to her. It was because I truly wanted to be with her for the rest of my life. Let's fast forward to now. I've been happily married to Anna for more than 20 years. Together, we have created a loving, trustworthy, and respectful existence. Our world is brightened by our two wonderful children, and I am incredibly thankful for this second opportunity at happiness. In retrospect, I'm happy I came across Mary's journal. It was the wake-up call I needed, even if it hurt like hell at the moment. I may have lived my entire life settling for someone who didn't genuinely respect me if I hadn't discovered it. I took away from all of this a straightforward lesson. If anything feels off, don't dismiss the warning signs. Have faith in your instincts. Above all, avoid ever being someone else's backup plan. I don't care about Mary and Billy, and I don't know where they are today. It's only fitting that they are no longer a part of my tale. Story 3. This narrative has a title. When I was pregnant, my sister ejected me, and my parents supported her. Hello everyone, I just wanted to let you know about something that's actually happening. Recently, the channel has been a little slower, and to be honest, I worked really hard to uncover these tales so that I could continue to provide you with the greatest material. It would mean the world to me if you found enjoyment in what I do. Assuming you clicked the subscribe button. Your assistance is crucial to the success of our adventure and makes all the difference. I really appreciate you being here with me. Let's begin the video now. According to the original poster, being a single mother isn't easy. But for the past 5 years, my daughter Lily and I have been fighting against the odds. I cheated on her father during my pregnancy and left him before she was even born. That was the last straw. I ejected him. I got back on my feet after filing for child support, which he seldom ever pays. The most logical thing to do following the breakup was to move back home with my parents. I figured, why not accept their offer of assistance? Family members are meant to help one another. It was effective for a time. I felt it was appropriate to help with food and pay their rent. In order for me to work, my mom promised to watch Lily a couple of days a week, but she soon began to renege on that commitment. She would tell me she was too busy to help or leave Lily in front of the TV instead of monitoring her. Even if it wasn't perfect, I could manage to save a little money and Lily was secure. Then, like a wrecking ball, Mia returned into our life. I will always remember coming home from work. Despite being worn out, I'm eager to see Lily. My younger sister was seated on the couch as if she had never left. When I stepped in, she hardly greeted me, her huge pregnant belly resting on her lap and a smug expression on her face. My relationship with Mia has never been the finest. She was always the golden kid growing up. Mia ran around acting like a brat whenever she smashed something, but I was the one who was taught to lead by example. I was always the target of my parents' accusations. They would argue that I should be the larger person if she started a fight. We continued to show preference as adults. It grew worse, if anything. Mia married Ben a few years ago, and the two of them relocated to Germany because of his work. I believe that our relationship may genuinely become better with distance. Out of mind and out of sight. Correct? Apparently not. She was treated like a superstar by my parents, who were often gushing about how pleased they were of her for relocating overseas. The best response I received while balancing work, a newborn, and an absent husband was, well, that's just part of being an adult. It was startling to find Mia back at home, lounging on the couch as though she owned the space. Before I could ask my mom all the questions I wanted to, she came up with the solution. She remarked in a happy tone as if this were the finest news imaginable. Oh, Mia's back for good. For good? Trying to seem unbiased, I asked. From her place on the couch, Mia, ever the queen of sarcasm, responded, yes, we will remain here. This is just simpler for us now that Ben has been sent back to the United States. Do you have an issue with that? Reality was setting in quickly, but I bit my tongue. Mia was more than a guest. She was going to live there for good, my mother went on. In order to support Mia during her pregnancy and after the baby is born, we decided it would be best for her to remain here, even though Ben has company housing. Assist her? My mother hardly ever came to see me when I was pregnant. She most definitely didn't offer to let me return or provide any kind of significant assistance. My mom couldn't be bothered, so I had to make do on my own by hiring a nanny while working full-time. However, it was an entirely different story for me. By bringing food, fluffing pillows, and pretending to be a fragile princess, my mom was virtually stumbling over herself to make her feel at ease. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, I had to inquire, what about space? This isn't exactly a large space. Mia shot back before my mom could respond. Don't stress over it. We'll work things out. She didn't seem to care how it affected me or Lily based on her tone. She now owned this house. My mother dismissed my worries, stating, "Oh, we'll work something out. Don't worry." That night, I felt sick to my stomach as I went to bed. The idea that this was going to become a nightmare kept coming to mind. Mia hadn't changed one bit. She was still the same entitled, manipulative person she'd always been, and now she was going to occupy the one remaining area of safety that Lily and I had. The preference became even more obvious over the course of the following several days. My mother attended to all of my needs, preparing her meals, taking care of her errands, and even purchasing pregnant pillows for her. I was fortunate if my mother volunteered to prepare a snack for Lily in the interim. It was enragement rather than annoyance. There was obvious hypocrisy. However, my mother would shrug and respond, "Well, Mia's pregnant," whenever I attempted to bring it up. Right now, she needs extra assistance. My mother wasn't the only one. Normally calmer, my dad suddenly became Mia's strongest ally. For hours, Dad would sit and talk to her about the baby, remembering our childhood, like I didn't even exist. Lily and I seemed to be invisible. Naturally, Mia enjoyed every moment of it. She made mocking remarks about how, despite the fact that I was paying rent, I should be thankful to have a place to live. She takes over the living room, scatters her belongings, and acts as though she is the only person who matters. She even dared to tell me that I should be happy one night. "Your parents are assisting you. Not everyone is as fortunate." Fortunate? Coming from someone who has been given everything in her life? That was rich. I wanted to retaliate, but I knew it would not change anything. My parents weren't going to support me, and Mia wasn't the kind to listen. I began to feel confined. My parents had always owned this house, but suddenly it seemed like Mia regardless of how much I contributed or how much I paid in rent. Lily and I were obviously second-class citizens. I made an effort to concentrate on my career and being the best mother I could be for Lily, but the stress in the home was overwhelming. In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated the impending storm. It was more than simply a reunion when Mia returned. It was the beginning of a power struggle. Furthermore, I was never going to succeed in my parents' eyes. Things quickly got out of hand and utterly out of control. After just 1 week of her return, Mia already felt like the head of the household. My parents catered to her every need, treating her as though she were made of glass. She yelled commands, wrote notes all over the place, and pretended that by putting up with me, she was helping me. In the meantime, I continued to cook for myself, pay my rent, and care for Lily on my own. At first, there were just faint indications that something was developing. The home seemed packed, and Mia began to protest loudly. Every time I entered the living room, she would let out a loud sigh or say something nasty like, "It's hard to relax with all this chaos around chaos." Although Mia behaved as though my daughter was a cyclone blasting through her valuable area, Lily is the most well-mannered child you can imagine. Naturally, my mother pulled me away. One evening, after Mia had complained about Lily playing with her toys in the living room, she added, "You have to understand, she's pregnant. You may become more sensitive to clutter and loudness due to pregnancy hormones. Everything but her own attitude is sensitive to her," I whispered to myself. My mother gave me a look that told it all, but she didn't say anything. In her view, I was the issue. Mia's grievances soon become demands. "I need the guest room for the nursery," she declared one day. "Keeping everything in the bedroom is too difficult." I was working on Lily's schoolwork at the table when I looked up. "Do you mean my room?" I squinted as I asked. "Yeah," Mia said, as if it were the most apparent thing in the world. "You can relocate to the basement or another location. Please pardon me. This is where I pay my rent. You can't simply evict me from my room." Mia looked to my mom, who was hanging close by, and rolled her eyes. "Tell Mom it's not a big issue. It is only a temporary situation." My mother paused and looked at each of us. She addressed me as though I were a child and said, "Sweetheart, if you just agreed, it would be easy for everyone. You don't need the room as much as Mia does." I had never before understood the extent my parents would go to for Mia. The fact that I had a child to care for, had paid rent, or had lived there longer didn't matter. I was only an annoyance, and Mia's desires came first. I refused to give up my room or allow someone to intimidate me into submitting, but I kept my ground. However, the tension in the family continued to rise, and I began to feel alienated in my own house. Mia made crude remarks about how fortunate I was, or how I should have moved out by now. Mom and Dad were very giving. Despite not saying anything directly, my parents' silence was quite telling. Whose side they were on was obvious. Then one day I realized right away that something was off when I got home from work. My initial impression was of Lily sitting on the front porch, looking frightened and holding her teddy rabbit. My boxes and baggage were beside her. I packed up everything I owned and threw it outside. "Mom?" Lily's voice wavered as she spoke. "Why are our belongings out here?" My heart fell. I bent over and gave her a strong embrace. I tried to sound steady as I said, "It's okay, baby. Let's investigate this inside." I opened the door, dragged my belongings after me, and entered. Mia was stretched out on the couch, browsing through her phone as if nothing had occurred. When I first noticed her, my dad was watching TV in his recliner while my mom was in the kitchen. They seemed as though throwing me out was simply another typical day. "What is this?" My voice trembling with rage, I demanded. "Why are my belongings outside?" Mia hardly raised her gaze. She responded nonchalantly, "We needed the space." "You were occupying too much space." My mother turned and used a dish towel to wipe her hands. "You always understood, my love, that this arrangement was temporary." Her tone was annoyingly calm as she said, "Mia craves solitude and tranquility because she is pregnant. You need to move on now. Proceed. This is where I pay my rent. I assist with grocery shopping. Do you believe that throwing Lily and me out in this manner is acceptable?" When my dad finally glanced up from the TV, he stated it was for the best rather than supporting me. "It will come to you." What I was hearing was unbelievable. They weren't only dismissing me. They had no qualms or regrets about what they were doing. Mia, too. She was having a great time. I wanted to shout at the arrogant smile on her face. She had achieved her goal of having the home to herself by removing Lily and me from the equation. It seemed to me then that there would be no use in disputing. Nothing I said would convince my folks otherwise. They had already made up their minds. I swallowed my rage, took Lily's hand, gathered our belongings, and left. However, I turned around and warned, "You'll regret this," as I was leaving. They didn't even bat an eyelid. My mother turned her head away. Mia grinned as if she had won a prize that evening, and my dad returned to watching TV. I held Lily close while she slept on the floor of a budget hotel room. Besides the fact that I was furious, I was also hurt. My parents were like this, the ones who were meant to care for and encourage me. And they had made the snap decision to pick Mia over me. However, I knew I couldn't let this destroy me as I gazed at Lily, who was so tiny and innocent. For her, I had to be strong. I wasn't only upset that we were ejected. The blatant contempt and arrogance they displayed infuriated me. I wasn't going to allow my folks get away with it since they'd gone too far. They believed they could ignore my kid and me and still expect me to continue making mortgage payments on their home. Not taking place. Years ago, when my parents refinanced the house, I called the bank first. Their credit was insufficient on its own, so I co-signed the loan. I believed I was assisting them at the time. I was unaware that when they conveniently omitted to submit payments, I would be left to pay the mortgage. I hadn't wanted to see them lose their house, so I had been covering for them for years. Now, however, I no longer felt that kind of loyalty. "I'm phoning to let you know." I informed the bank employee that I would no longer be paying loan payments. The agent was perplexed. "Ma'am, are you certain? Foreclosure might result from non-payment." I responded plainly, "That's fine. In any case, the house is not mine." Almost instantly, the burden was removed from my shoulders. I had been financially invested in that property for years, and my parents had treated me like a burden. They would now have to face the repercussions. I then gave a lawyer a call. I wanted to confirm that it was illegal for them to have thrown Lily and me out without warning. Since I wasn't on the lease, they couldn't legally remove me, but my rent payments did grant me certain rights as a renter. The attorney gave me the assurance that, if I so desired, I could seek damages or file a complaint. It was reassuring to know that I had choices. After completing those 2 calls, I focused on locating a new residence. It wasn't simple. It was difficult to find reasonably priced apartments, and the majority of them, either had lengthy wait lists or weren't in areas where I felt comfortable raising Lily. However, after looking for a few days, I discovered a modest one-bedroom apartment that was within my price range. We had it, even if it wasn't perfect. Nobody could expel us, and that was worth everything in and of itself. My parents started calling a week after I moved into the apartment. She sounded irritated at first. "How could you harm us like this?" She lost her temper. "Are you aware of the amount of stress you're causing Mia? For heaven's sake, she is pregnant." I gave a sour laugh. "Feeling stressed? You're talking about the amount of anguish you caused Lily and me when you threw us out. It's funny that you didn't care about that." On the defense, she added, "We didn't throw you out. All we needed was more room. In any case, you were going to depart eventually?" "Yes, Mother. Anything that aids in your nightly slumber." Then she changed her tone. By informing me how much problems they were in without my mortgage payments, she began guilt-tripping me. "Not everything is covered by your father's pension," she remarked. "We are currently delinquent on our bills. Is losing the house truly what you want?" "Yes," I stated plainly. "We were thrown away by you. After that, you have no right to ask for my assistance." "My father wasn't much better. You quote re being selfish," he said in his voicemail. "Your family is still here. Family members also look out for one another. Selfish." It hurt to hear that term. Given everything I had done for them over the years, I would jeopardize my financial security to ensure they had a place to live. They even had the audacity to accuse me of being selfish. Voicemail was deleted without a response. Then there was Mia. Oh, Mia. I hadn't seen anything yet if I had previously believed she was entitled. She began texting me nearly every day in a passive-aggressive manner. "I appreciate you making my pregnancy even more difficult. I hope you feel good about yourself. Do you no longer give a damn about this family, or are you too preoccupied with being the victim?" She even brought up Lily once in an attempt to control me. "How are you modeling behavior for your daughter? Instructing her to leave family when things get difficult. Feels sophisticated." All of her texts went unanswered by me. I wasn't going to give Mia the satisfaction of a reaction since she thrived on drama. However, every text simply strengthened my resolve to sever relations. Neither Lily nor I were important to these individuals. All that mattered to them was what I could do for them. The foreclosure notification reached my parents' home a few weeks later. My mother contacted me weeping uncontrollably, so I'm aware of this. The home will be taken by them. She let out a cry. "Take action," such as, with real curiosity I inquired, "It was you who wanted me gone. You're receiving what you desired now. You quote, not understanding." She cried. "Mia is now unable to cope with this level of stress. You are stronger than she is." I couldn't contain my laughter. "Oh, I've gained strength. Given that you have treated me like the second best person my whole life, it's amusing. Mom, figure it out. I'm finished." Lily and I were getting used to our new flat in the meanwhile. It was comfortable, yet not ostentatious. For the first time in years, we spent our weekends touring the local parks and playgrounds, and I adorned her room with fairy lights and her favorite cartoon characters. I was liberated. No more being cautious with Mia. I'm done going out of my way to satisfy parents who didn't value me. Lily and I were alone, and that was more than sufficient. "I enjoy living here, Mother," Lily remarked as she gazed up at me one evening as I was putting her to bed. "It feels secure." I was moved to tears by what she said. Although it wasn't much, this small flat belonged to us. We couldn't let anyone take it away, and it was crucial. My folks were in full-blown panic mode by the end of the month. They tried to guilt-trip me and beg for my assistance in their nearly daily phone calls. Even via common acquaintances, Mia attempted to send messages accusing me of destroying the family, but I resisted. In my life, for the first time, I refused to be influenced by them. They were now coping with the repercussions of their decisions. And to be honest, it felt nice to defend myself at last. My parents were in complete breakdown mode by the time the foreclosure process began. It was hard to ignore the incessant calls, voicemails, and even messages from family members urging me to assist the family, even if I wasn't actively monitoring them. It seems that my parents had given a heavily manipulated account of what happened to everyone. They said that I had abandoned them during a trying time and refused to provide for my family, causing poor Mia to endure unnecessary stress while she was pregnant. Nothing about them throwing Lily and I out. Naturally, it was only me, the egotistical daughter, who stopped making mortgage payments. The calls became more imaginative. Emily, my mother, left progressively frantic voicemails. You were reared by us. And you pay us back like this? Your dad is inconsolable. Please keep Mia in mind. Any day now, her baby's due. Furthermore, the stress is intolerable. Are you sure you want us to be homeless? What will Lily think of that when she gets older? The song was the same every time. Manipulation of emotions encased in a guilt trip. After a time, I stopped listening to the messages. My mother alternated between crying and ranting about how I was destroying the family and the few that I unintentionally replied. Then there was Mia. Oh, Mia. She did more than simply guilt trip me. She became more aggressive. She started making me the bad guy in her social media posts. I began receiving screenshots of these postings from friends we had in common. I've discovered that family isn't always there for you in times of need. Some folks are simply cold-hearted. Some individuals can be so vicious, it's unbelievable, particularly during a holy moment like pregnancy. I suppose that for some people, money is more important than family. I initially chose to dismiss it, but then I received a message from a buddy asking why Mia was claiming that you had left her homeless. I became aware of the extent of her willingness. Mia wasn't only attempting to blame me, she was resting flat out. I considered dealing with it, then I changed my mind. I wasn't going to waste energy defending myself to her social media henchmen, since the people who mattered understood the truth. Besides, she was going to face far more serious issues soon. A few weeks later came the formal foreclosure notice. My mother frantically phoned me right away. The house is being taken by them. How will we proceed? Her voice cracked as she sobbed. It sounds like a brand new issue, I answered calmly. Remember, I don't live there anymore. Please, sweetheart, she pleaded. There is nowhere for Mia to go. You are aware that the necessities are hardly covered by your father's pension. Everything will be lost for us. When you depend on someone and then stab them in the back, that's what occurs. I said, perhaps you will reconsider evicting the individual providing your housing the next time. Robert, my father, attempted something different. Later that day, he gave a call. Quieter but no less entitled was his tone. You don't want to see us homeless, do you? I realized that things became hot. Consider Lily. What would you think if she ever abandoned you? Funny, I remarked. You know, like when you threw Lily and I out, you turned your back on us? Perhaps she should learn to not put up with those who treat her like trash. Then he ended the call. Their flawless family facade began to reveal cracks as the foreclosure went on. Mia was furious. She was shocked that my parents had allowed things to go this bad, based on what I've heard from mutual acquaintances. As if they hadn't already gone out of their way to accommodate her, she accused them of failing to provide financial support. They need to have devised a strategy to retain the residents. According to reports, she told one pal, I'm expecting a child. What should I do at this point, Ben? Nor was her spouse overjoyed. Since they returned to the United States and now had a kid on the way, he had reportedly been paying the majority of their expenses. Mia's arrogant demeanor was starting to get on his nerves. Ben had had enough by the time their baby was born. I assumed that his reason for leaving her was irreconcilable disagreements. I'm sick of putting up with her bullshit. Naturally, Mia played the victim by sharing tearful selfies with captions that read, "Single mom." Without anyone's help, life may be quite difficult. Furthermore, some people are simply not suited for true commitment. My parents were forced to relocate to a modest apartment in a less attractive area of town in the interim. My dad's pension hardly paid their expenses, and my mom got a part-time work at a drugstore, something she hadn't done in decades. Their formerly cozy way of life had fallen apart, and they were now finally confronting the consequences of their decisions. In a way, I felt somewhat vindicated. They had been depending on me to ignore my financial contributions and treat me as if I were an afterthought for years. They were now dealing with the fallout from their entitlement, and it was obvious that they weren't managing it well. My mother called again, sobbing as she described how difficult things had become. She cried, "We can hardly afford groceries." In order to pay the rent last month, we had to sell the dining room set. Calmly, I answered, I don't see how that's my problem. Your decisions were your own. Move in with them now. Mia made a last-ditch attempt to enlist me again. She blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in her life in a lengthy text message. My pregnancy was damaged by you, made my parents oppose me. You're now only observing our suffering from a distance. I hope you're content with who you are. I took a good look at the words before erasing it. I owed myself nothing, not an apology, not an explanation, and most definitely not my assistance. Lily and I, meantime, were doing well. Our small flat had transformed into a peaceful, laughing haven. I finally moved to a nicer area while planning to obtain a better career. But I was happy for the moment. The last update. The consequences would eventually reach its lowest point. Ben, Mia's husband, had abandoned her, and my parents had lost the house. The home has vanished. All of their bridges appeared to be burned, and the debts were mounting. Lily and I, meantime, were doing better than ever. Although our tiny flat was unpretentious, it was secure, tranquil, and most of all, ours. About 2 months after the foreclosure was completed, my phone rang one evening. It was my mother. I was interested enough to respond because I hadn't heard from her in weeks. "Hi there?" With caution, I said, "My dear." Her voice trembled as she exclaimed, "We must speak. Would you please come over?" I scowled. "Come on over." Where the home was lost. On Ridgeway Street, we're lodging in a modest flat. "Quickly," she said. "It's not much, but for the time being, it's home. Just come, please. You are necessary to us." I chose to go against my better judgment. A part of me wanted to know how far things had fallen apart for them. I was in disbelief when I got there. The little flat was filled with outdated, mismatched furnishings. My parents appeared worn out and discouraged, despite their lifelong pride in their once beautiful home. Mia and her infant sat in the corner, both of them looking just as wretched. My mother wrung her hands anxiously and whispered, "Thanks for coming." "What are you looking for?" I inquired, getting right to the point. Tears filled my mother's eyes. "We have erred. Now we are aware of that. But we need your assistance since we're having trouble. What specifically do you need help with?" I folded my arms and asked. "The expenses are mounting." My father spoke in a tone that was softer than I had ever heard. "We've had to sell practically everything of worth since we're late on our rent. Mia. Even though Mia is doing her hardest, she is now unable to accomplish it alone." At last, Mia raised her voice. Despite her pathetic look, her tone was keen. "We are in this situation because of you. We wouldn't be here if you hadn't ceased making mortgage payments." I laughed resentfully. "You mean if Lily and I hadn't been evicted from the house? This wouldn't have happened if I was paying for it. It's funny how that operates." Mia's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. My mother made an effort to make things better. Things weren't handled well by us. Now we can see that. "However, we're not doing as well as you are. Please, for the sake of your family, can't you find it in your heart to assist us?" I was both angry and incredulous as I looked at her. For the sake of family? The same family who had thoughtlessly thrown my kid and I out. I was treated like an afterthought by the same family that had treated me like a princess. "No," I answered firmly. "I amn't assisting you." My mother's face fell flat. "Please, sweetheart, we are in dire straits. When you tossed me in, I was too." "Lily, out!" I yelled. "And you showed no concern. Remember how you told me to work things out? It's your time now then." My father attempted to interrupt. "Now it's different. Mia has a baby and we are older. This cannot be done by us alone. I have no responsibility for Mia's child," I said icily. "Your bills aren't either. Your decisions were your own. Move in with them now." There was a brief silence in the room. I hoped they would finally get it. Then Mia spoke once again. "You are really self-centered. However," she began, but my mother interrupted her. "Mia." She lost her temper. We were both surprised. I had never saw my mother chastise her before. "This isn't assisting." Mia gave me a childish glare while huffing and crossing her arms. My mother grabbed my arm as I turned to go. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Wait, just give it some thought, please. We don't have many demands. Just a little assistance till we are able to stand again." I shrugged off her hand. "When I was contributing to your home and paying your mortgage, you had all the assistance in the world. You tossed it aside. I'm not familiar with that at all." I ignored their objections and left the room. I would no longer allow them to control me. The calls decreased in frequency during the next 2 weeks. They were much more desperate when they did, though. My mother sobbed as she left voicemails about how difficult life was. "We've reached our lowest point," she remarked. "How much longer we can wait is beyond me." Mia, meantime, persisted in her outbursts on social media, portraying herself as the victim of callous familial treachery. Sometimes I got screenshots from friends, but I didn't mind. Allow her to act like the victim. I was aware of the reality. Anyone who mattered did too. Then one day the call completely ceased. Through a distant cousin, I learned that my parents had downsized and were selling what little they had left. According to reports, Mia had found herself at a shelter, her infant still holding on to the idea that she owed the world something. Lily and I, meantime, were doing well. Our tiny flat had transformed into a warm haven full with love and laughter. I was able to save money for the future since I had obtained a better career. On the weekends, Lily and I would spend peaceful nights at home, explore parks, or go to museums. As I watched her play and grin, I was reminded of the reasons for my decisions. I was determined to give her the steady, joyful life she deserved. "I enjoy being here, Mother," Lily remarked to me one evening as we watched her favorite movie on the couch. "It's ideal, and just the two of us." I was moved to tears by what she said. I had let the poisonous nature of my family to control my life for a very long time. I felt completely at ease for the first time in years now that I was free. Mia and my parents were now dealing with the fallout from the decisions they had made. For my part, I had at last discovered my strength. No matter how much they pleaded, I had no intention of returning. The future of my kid, my life, and my happiness were far more valuable than anything they could provide, and I understood it to be the last triumph.